A shadow returns to Asteria Prime. The towering gates of the celestial palace open slowly, their pristine silver finish shimmering in the twin suns of Asteria Prime. Commander Ethan Calloway, encased in his sleek black combat armor, stepped through with a purpose that could silence a crowd. At 38, Ethan was a decorated human officer renowned for his bravery, but few on this planet remembered him from his earlier days as a humble royal guard. The marble hallways of the palace hadn't changed much since Ethan's departure a decade ago, still a mesmerizing blend of advanced alien technology and ancient artistry. As he strode forward, his heavy boots left faint echoes in the grand corridors. Staff members, adorned in intricate Asterian robes, quickly stepped aside, whispering nervously. To them, humans were rare and imposing visitors. But today, their awe carried an undercurrent of unease. An aide approached, bowing slightly. "Commander Calloway, King Althra requests your presence in the High Council chamber." Ethan gave a curt nod, his visor retracting to reveal a chiseled face lined with years of war and responsibility. His piercing blue eyes, still sharp as a blade, scanned the surroundings as memories flooded back. He had once roamed these halls as a protector, but now he returned as a man carrying the weight of countless victories, and a world that had changed him. As he followed the aide through the twisting corridors, something caught his eye. A fleeting figure, a glimmer of violet. Ethan turned sharply, locking eyes with a striking alien woman stepping into view. Her violet skin shimmered under the palace's golden lights, her long, iridescent hair cascading like liquid silk. She was dressed in a flowing, intricate gown adorned with the royal crest of Asteria Prime. "Commander Calloway," she said, her voice like a melody, tinged with authority and amusement. "You look different." For a moment, Ethan was silent, his eyes narrowing slightly as he tried to place her. And then it hit him, a memory of a frightened girl clutching his hand during an assassination attempt in the royal gardens. She had grown into someone unrecognizable. "Princess Ceres," he said, bowing slightly. "You've changed." Her lips curled into a smirk. 10 years does that, Commander. Or have you forgotten the timid child you saved from an ambush?" "I don't forget, Your Highness," Ethan replied. "I just didn't expect you to glow so brightly." Ceres chuckled, the sound like wind chimes in the quiet hall. "Asterian bioluminescence, another thing you probably forgot about our kind. But I suspect you're not here for a reunion." She took a step closer, her violet eyes studying him with disarming intensity. "What brings Earth's war hero back to these halls?" Before Ethan could answer, the council chamber doors opened with a soft hum. Ceres's gaze lingered on him, a playful glint in her eyes, before she swept past him, her presence magnetic and commanding. The High Council's demand. Inside the chamber, King Althra stood tall, his dark violet skin marked with the wisdom of age. Around him sat a mix of alien dignitaries, their expressions a blend of curiosity and concern. The room fell silent as Ethan stepped forward, his presence drawing every eye. "Commander Calloway," the king began, his deep voice echoing across the chamber. "Your arrival is timely. Asteria faces threats that only Earth's finest strategist can counter." Ethan nodded. "Your Majesty, I'm here to serve." As discussions of intergalactic politics and growing insurgencies unfolded, Ethan noticed Ceres seated beside the king, her gaze unwavering. She seemed uninterested in the council's deliberations, her focus entirely on him. Ethan tried to ignore it, but her intensity was impossible to dismiss. When the meeting concluded, and Ethan turned to leave, Ceres rose, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Father, before Commander Calloway departs, I have an announcement." The room stilled. Ceres stepped forward, her presence radiating confidence. "I wish to marry Commander Calloway." The chamber erupted. Voices overlapped in disbelief, and dignitaries exchanged shocked glances. Ethan froze, unsure if he had misheard her. King Althra's face darkened, his grip tightening on his throne's armrests. Ceres, the king growled, this is no time for childish games. This is no game, father, Ceres countered, her voice steady. Commander Calloway represents everything we need in these turbulent times, strength, honor, and an alliance that could unite our people. Ethan found his voice, though it felt like an effort. Your Highness, this is unexpected. Ceres turned to him, her expression softening, though her confidence never wavered. Commander, you once told me that strength lies in trust and unity. I intend to prove it. The king rose, his commanding presence silencing the chamber. We will discuss this in private, he declared, his tone brooking no argument. Ceres inclined her head, but her eyes lingered on Ethan. There was a determination in her gaze that unsettled him, yet something about her words resonated deep within him. A complicated return. Ethan spent the following days immersed in his duties, assessing the palace's security and strategizing defenses against looming threats. Yet, Ceres's declaration loomed over him like a shadow. The palace buzzed with whispers, and every encounter with Ceres only added fuel to the fire. She seemed to appear wherever he went, her charm as disarming as it was deliberate. Commander, she said one afternoon, catching him inspecting a shield generator. Care for a walk in the gardens? It's where our story began, after all. Ethan sighed, turning to face her. Your Highness, I'm here to protect this palace, not reminisce. And yet, she replied, stepping closer, you seem to protect me more than anyone else. Her words, playful yet serious, left Ethan momentarily speechless. He could see the resolve in her eyes, and he knew that whatever her reasons, she wasn't going to back down. The stage was set, and Ethan knew one thing for certain, his return to Asteria Prime was going to be far more complicated, and far more dangerous, than he had ever anticipated. Whispers of shadows. The twilight skies of Asteria Prime glimmered with faint constellations as Ethan Calloway patrolled the palace grounds. His combat instincts, honed over years of battle, told him something was off. The whispers of court gossip about Princess Ceres's bold announcement had reached every corner of the palace, but the commander's focus remained sharp. There was a threat lurking in the shadows, and Ethan had no intention of letting it slip through. Unseen danger. Ethan's communicator buzzed softly. Commander, a voice crackled, belonging to Sergeant Kale, one of the Asterian guards. We've detected unusual energy signatures near the royal quarters. On my way, Ethan replied, his tone clipped. He adjusted the settings on his armor, activating its cloaking module. The black and gold suit melted into the darkness as he moved silently through the corridors, his every step calculated. As he neared the royal quarters, Ethan's sharp gaze caught the faintest flicker of movement. A cloaked figure was scaling the palace walls with an unnatural agility. Activating his enhanced optics, Ethan zoomed in to see the intruder planting a small, glowing device near the princess's window. An unlikely partner. Ethan raised his arm, the targeting module locking onto the intruder. Before he could fire, a voice broke through the tense silence. Commander, Ceres whispered, stepping out from the shadows. Princess, Ethan hissed, his voice barely audible. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, she retorted, her bioluminescent glow faint in the dim light. This is my palace, after all. Before Ethan could argue, the cloaked figure turned, its glowing eyes locking onto them. It launched itself off the wall, drawing a sleek, alien weapon. Ethan grabbed Ceres, pulling her behind a nearby column as energy bolts sizzled past them. Stay here, he ordered, his tone leaving no room for debate. Ceres smirked. You forget, Commander, I've trained in combat too. She reached for a concealed blade, the elegant weapon shimmering in her hand. Ethan suppressed a groan. Of course you have. The clash. The intruder was fast, inhumanly so. It lunged at Ethan with a feral precision, its weapon humming with lethal energy. Ethan countered, using his armor's strength to deflect the blows. The clash of metal on energy sent sparks flying, illuminating the dark corridor. Ceres, refusing to stay idle, used her agility to outmaneuver the attacker. With a swift slash, she disarmed the intruder, sending its weapon skittering across the floor. Ethan seized the opportunity, pinning the figure against the wall. "Who sent you?" he growled, his grip tightening. The intruder hissed, its voice distorted. "You protect what's already lost." Before Ethan could respond, the figure activated a small device on its belt, dissolving into a haze of light. The only thing left behind was a faint scorch mark on the wall. A growing threat. Ceres picked up the glowing device the intruder had left behind. Her violet eyes narrowed as she examined it. "This isn't Asterian tech," she said. "It's something else." Ethan took the device, his mind racing. "Off-worlders," he muttered. "Whoever they are, they're targeting you." Ceres crossed her arms, her expression defiant. "Then it's a good thing I have Earth's finest warrior protecting me." "This isn't a game, princess," Ethan snapped. "You're in real danger." Her gaze softened, but her resolve remained unshaken. "And yet, you're still here, risking your life to keep me safe." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because it's my duty." Ceres stepped closer, her tone quieter but no less firm. "Is it just duty, Ethan? Or is there something more?" For a moment, he didn't answer, his blue eyes locking onto hers. "You need to stay vigilant," he said finally, his voice betraying nothing. "We don't know how deep this threat runs." Uncovering the shadows. The next morning, Ethan and Ceres convened in a secured strategy room. Holographic maps of the palace and surrounding territories flickered to life as Ethan analyzed the intruder's escape route. "This isn't a random attack," Ethan said, pointing to key locations on the map. "They knew exactly where to strike. Whoever they are, they've been watching for a long time." Ceres leaned against the table, her violet hair cascading over one shoulder. "Then we find out who they are and stop them." Ethan glanced at her. "You sound far too eager for someone whose life is at risk." She smirked. "I've spent my entire life being protected. Maybe it's time I fought back." "You're bold," Ethan admitted. "But boldness without caution gets people killed." "Then teach me," Ceres said, her tone suddenly serious. "You've seen the worst the galaxy has to offer. Show me how to fight it." Ethan hesitated. "This isn't something you just learn overnight." "Good thing I'm a fast learner," Ceres replied, her determination unwavering. A dangerous alliance. As the days passed, Ethan reluctantly agreed to train Ceres. Their sessions were grueling, but Ceres proved to be as resilient as she was stubborn. Ethan found himself admiring her tenacity, though he kept his emotions guarded. Meanwhile, the investigation into the intruder deepened. Ethan uncovered traces of a shadowy organization operating beyond the known star systems. Their motives remained unclear, but their actions pointed to one undeniable truth: they wanted Princess Ceres out of the picture. Ethan knew the stakes were higher than he'd initially realized. Protecting Ceres wasn't just about saving a princess. It was about preserving the fragile balance between Earth and Asteria. And as he watched her spar with unrelenting focus, he couldn't help but feel that their destinies were more intertwined than either of them had anticipated. A trail of deception. The air on Asteria Prime was charged with tension as Ethan Calloway stood in the shadows of the Royal Archives. It was well past midnight, and the grand halls were deserted, save for the faint hum of automated sentries patrolling the perimeter. Ethan's instincts told him that the glowing device left behind by the intruder held secrets, a clue to who was targeting Princess Ceres. Decoding the device. The device was unlike anything Ethan had encountered. Its intricate lattice of alien components pulsed faintly, emitting a soft hum that seemed almost alive. Using the palace's secure terminal, he connected it to a decoding program, watching as lines of alien script unraveled into something comprehensible. Asterian. Terran. And something else, a hybrid language he didn't recognize. "What are you doing?" came a voice from behind him. Ethan turned sharply to find Sarah standing in the doorway. She wore a simple robe, her violet skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Despite the late hour, her gaze was sharp, her curiosity piqued. "You shouldn't be here," Ethan said, his voice low. "This is sensitive." "Sensitive?" she repeated, stepping closer. "You're trying to save my life, Commander. I think that makes it my business." Ethan sighed, his resolve softening. "This device contains coordinates, off-world. Whoever is behind this attack didn't come alone." Saris leaned over his shoulder, her proximity unsettling yet oddly comforting. "Coordinates to where?" "A mining colony," Ethan replied, frowning as the data completed its decryption. "Or at least, that's what it's supposed to be. A reluctant partnership." The next morning, Ethan approached King Althara with his findings. The king, flanked by advisors, listened intently as Ethan laid out the details of the intruder's device and the coordinates it revealed. "We need to investigate," Ethan concluded. "If we don't act now, we're leaving the princess vulnerable." The king's expression darkened. "You propose leaving my daughter's side to chase shadows?" Ethan straightened. "With respect, Your Majesty, I can do more to protect her by eliminating the threat at its source." "I'll go with him," Saris interjected, stepping into the chamber. The room erupted into protests. Advisors whispered furiously, and the king rose from his throne, his voice booming. "Absolutely not. Father," Sarah said firmly, her voice cutting through the chaos, "this isn't just about me. If our enemies are targeting the royal family, they won't stop with me. Let me help end this." Ethan turned to her, his jaw tightening. "This isn't a negotiation. It's dangerous." "All the more reason I should be there," she countered, meeting his gaze. "You trained me to be ready for this." King Althara's glare shifted between them before he finally relented. "If you're determined to go, you'll do so under one condition. Commander Calloway, you will not let her out of your sight." Ethan gave a stiff nod. "Understood." Into the unknown. The journey to the mining colony was uneventful, but the silence between Ethan and Saris was anything but. The small starship hummed softly as they hurtled through the void, its dim lighting casting long shadows. Saris occupied herself by examining the weapons Ethan had brought, her focus intense. "You've been quiet," she remarked, breaking the silence. Ethan didn't look up from the console. "I'm focused." "Focused on avoiding me, you mean?" He sighed, turning to face her. "This isn't a game, princess. If we're walking into an ambush, I need to know you'll listen to me." She arched an eyebrow. "And if I don't? Then I'll drag you back to the ship myself," he said evenly. Her smirk faded, replaced by something more vulnerable. "You think I'm reckless, don't you?" "I think you're brave," Ethan admitted after a pause. "But bravery without caution is a risk we can't afford." The mining colony. The colony was a desolate place, its barren landscape bathed in the faint glow of a dying star. As their ship landed on the outskirts, Ethan's instincts screamed danger. The air was too still, the silence too absolute. "We're being watched," he muttered, his hand resting on his weapon. Saris adjusted her cloak, her expression unreadable. "Then let's give them something to watch." Ethan shot her a warning look, but she merely smiled. Together, they moved through the abandoned structures, their every step echoing in the eerie quiet. The coordinates led them to a large central building, its entrance partially obscured by debris. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of burnt machinery. A faint blue glow emanated from the center of the room, a massive terminal pulsating with energy. Ethan approached cautiously, scanning for traps. "This isn't just a mining outpost," he said, his voice low. "It's a command center." Saris stepped closer, her eyes widening as she recognized the Asterian sigils etched into the walls. These are royal codes. Someone from Asteria set this up. Before Ethan could respond, the terminal flared to life. A holographic figure appeared, a shadowy humanoid with distorted features. "You're persistent," the figure rasped, its voice dripping with malice. "But you're too late. The princess's fate is sealed." Ethan drew his weapon. "Who are you?" The figure laughed, a hollow sound that sent chills down their spines. "Someone who knows the price of power, and the weakness of your so-called alliances." The hologram flickered, and a countdown appeared on the terminal. 10 seconds. "Move!" Ethan shouted, grabbing Saris as the room began to quake. They sprinted for the exit, the sound of machinery exploding behind them. Flames licked at their heels as they dove out into the open air, the building collapsing in a fiery roar. A new enemy. As they caught their breath, Ethan turned to Saris, his expression grim. "This isn't just about you. It's about Asteria's future." Saris nodded, her determination hardening. "Then we fight. Together." Ethan stared at her, seeing in her the same resolve that had carried him through countless battles. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe they might stand a chance. But as the starship lifted off, heading back to Asteria, Ethan knew one thing for certain: the fight was far from over, and the shadows they faced ran deeper than he had ever imagined. The Web Titans. The return to Asteria Prime was anything but triumphant. The shadows they had uncovered on the mining colony loomed over them like a gathering storm. As the starship docked in the royal hangar, Ethan Calloway's mind churned with possibilities. The holographic figure's taunt echoed in his thoughts: the princess's fate is sealed. An unexpected ally. Ethan and Saris stepped off the ship, their cloaks billowing in the wind of the docking bay. Waiting for them was a figure Ethan hadn't expected to see: Commander Kale, one of the king's top security officers. Kale's sharp golden eyes narrowed as he approached. "I didn't authorize this little adventure," Kale said, his tone clipped as he looked at Saris. "I didn't need your permission," she replied coolly, her violet gaze unwavering. Ethan stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. "We found something you'll want to see." Kale's expression softened, but his tone remained skeptical. "And what exactly did you find?" "A network," Ethan said, handing him a data crystal they had recovered. "One that connects off-world operatives to someone high up in Asteria's court." Kale's brow furrowed as he examined the crystal. "If this is true, then we have a traitor in our midst." "We don't just have a traitor," Saris interjected. "We have a conspiracy. A dangerous revelation." Later, in the secure confines of the palace's war room, Ethan, Saris, and Kale pored over the data. The crystal's contents painted a chilling picture: encrypted communications, troop movements, and detailed layouts of the palace, all tied to a secretive group known only as the Obsidian Veil. "They've been planning this for years," Ethan said, his voice tight with anger. "Every move, every step, it all leads back to the princess." Saris leaned over the table, her fingers gripping its edges. "Why me? What do they want?" "You're more than just a princess," Ethan said, meeting her gaze. "You're a symbol. If they destroy you, they destabilize the entire kingdom." Kale's jaw tightened. "We need to move fast. If they've infiltrated the palace, no one is safe. The trap is set." Ethan's plan was bold, bordering on reckless. Using Saris as bait to lure the Obsidian Veil into the open was a risk he wasn't entirely comfortable with, but it was the only way to expose their enemies. Saris, of course, agreed without hesitation. "You're enjoying this too much," Ethan muttered as they prepared for the operation. Saris smirked, adjusting her combat gear. "What can I say? I've always wanted to see how far your famous Earth tactics can go." As the palace prepared for a grand gala, a cover for their operation, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a firestorm. The Obsidian Veil was cunning, and if the data they'd uncovered was correct, they weren't just targeting Ceres. They were aiming to topple the entire monarchy. The gala begins. The grand hall shimmered with light as nobles and dignitaries gathered, their elaborate attire reflecting the opulence of Asturian culture. Ceres stood at the center, her presence commanding, even in the face of danger. Ethan, dressed in formal armor, stayed close, his every movement calculated. "You're staring," Ceres said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Just doing my job," he replied, scanning the room for threats. Her lips curved into a sly smile. "Is that all it is?" Before he could answer, Kale's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Commander, we have movement near the east wing." Ethan's muscles tensed. "Stay here," he said to Ceres, his tone leaving no room for argument. She arched an eyebrow. "Do you really think I'm going to listen?" He sighed. "I was hoping." The attack. Ethan moved swiftly through the east wing, his weapon drawn. The darkened corridor was eerily quiet, the only sound his boots on the polished floor. He didn't notice Ceres following until she appeared at his side. "I told you to stay," he hissed. "And I told you I wouldn't," she shot back. Before he could argue further, a shadow emerged from the darkness. It was one of the Obsidian Veil's operatives, clad in sleek black armor that shimmered faintly. Without hesitation, the figure lunged at Ethan, a blade flashing in the dim light. Ethan countered, their weapons clashing with a deafening crack. Ceres, armed with a dagger, flanked the operative, her movements precise. Together, they forced the attacker back, but the fight was far from over. More figures appeared, their presence confirming Ethan's worst fears. "It's an ambush," he growled, his eyes darting to Ceres. "We need to move." The turning point. The battle spilled into the grand hall, the sounds of combat shattering the gala's serene atmosphere. Guests screamed and scattered as Ethan and Ceres fought side by side, their coordination seamless. Kale and his guards joined the fray, their weapons cutting through the chaos. But it wasn't enough. The Obsidian Veil's operatives were relentless, their tactics coordinated. Ethan realized they had underestimated their enemy. "They're not here to kill you," he said to Ceres as they took cover behind an overturned table. "They're here to take you." "Then we don't let them," she replied, her determination unwavering. With a roar, Ethan surged forward, his weapon blazing. Ceres followed, her movements graceful and deadly. Together, they turned the tide, forcing the attackers to retreat. A hollow victory. When the dust settled, the grand hall was in ruins. The Obsidian Veil had fled, leaving behind only destruction and unanswered questions. Ethan stood amidst the wreckage, his mind racing. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Ceres approached him, her expression both fierce and weary. "We sent them running. For now," Ethan said, his voice heavy. "But they'll be back. And next time, they won't underestimate us." Ceres placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. "Then we'll be ready." Ethan met her gaze, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "We'll have to be." As the palace staff began to clear the wreckage, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the Obsidian Veil's plans were only beginning, and that their true goal was something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The Hunter's Gambit. The palace was still smoldering from the battle, but Ethan Calloway couldn't afford to rest. The Obsidian Veil had retreated, leaving behind chaos, fear, and a chilling message. As he sifted through the wreckage of the Grand Hall, his mind raced with questions. Why had they targeted Ceres so specifically? What was the endgame? He knew one thing for certain, the next strike would be even more calculated. A message in the shadows. That evening, Ceres found Ethan in the palace's underground command center. The glow of holographic maps lit the room in shades of blue, reflecting off the tired lines of his face. He stood hunched over a console, analyzing surveillance footage from the attack. "Any leads?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Ethan didn't look up. Not yet. They wiped their data trail clean. But this, he tapped on the console, bringing up an image of a shattered medallion found on one of the attackers. The insignia on it was unmistakable, an ancient Asterian symbol for rebirth. It's not just rebellion, Sarah said, stepping closer. It's ideology. Ethan nodded. They're not just after you, Princess. They're after what you represent, a new era of unity between Earth and Asteria. If they destroy you, they destroy that future. Before Saris could respond, Kale entered the room, his expression grim. Commander, we've intercepted a transmission. Ethan's jaw tightened. Play it. The room filled with static before a distorted voice cut through. You think you've won? You've only delayed the inevitable. The princess belongs to us now. Ethan's fists clenched. Where did this come from? Kale hesitated. A location deep in the nebula expanse. But it's a trap. It has to be. I don't care, Ethan said, his voice like steel. If they want us to walk into a trap, we'll make sure they regret it. Into the nebula. The nebula expanse was a graveyard of forgotten ships and swirling cosmic storms. Their small vessel navigated cautiously, its shields flickering under the barrage of interstellar debris. Sarah sat beside Ethan in the cockpit, her usual confidence tempered by the vastness of the unknown. Do you think they'll be waiting for us? She asked. They'll be waiting, Ethan replied, his eyes scanning the sensors. But so will we. The coordinates led them to an ancient station hidden within the nebula's densest region. Its design was archaic, its metal exterior scarred by centuries of decay. As they docked, Ethan's instincts screamed danger, but he pushed forward, his focus unwavering. The labyrinth within. Inside, the station was a labyrinth of dark corridors and flickering lights. The air was thick, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were watching. Ethan led the way, his weapon drawn, while Saris followed closely, her steps surprisingly quiet for someone untrained in stealth. Stay close, he whispered. Saris rolled her eyes. I'm not wandering off, Ethan. They moved deeper into the station until they reached a central chamber. There, surrounded by a faint blue glow, was a figure cloaked in shadow. It wasn't an operative this time, it was the leader of the Obsidian Veil. You've come far, the figure said, its voice calm and cold. But you're too late. The leader revealed. As the figure stepped into the light, Saris gasped. The face beneath the hood was familiar, a former advisor to her father, one who had disappeared years ago under mysterious circumstances. Counselor Varith. Saris's voice wavered. Varith smirked. Princess. Still as naive as ever. Ethan's weapon was trained on him in an instant. Why target her? What's your endgame? Varith laughed, the sound echoing ominously. You think this is about her? No, Commander. This is about power. The old ways are dying, and Asteria has no place for weakness. The princess's vision of unity is a disease, and I am the cure. You betrayed your people, Sarah said, her voice hardening. You betrayed my father. Your father betrayed us first, Varith snapped. He opened our borders to Earth, to outsiders. He made us weak. Ethan's grip on his weapon tightened. Where's the rest of your army? They're closer than you think, Varith replied with a sinister smile. And when they strike, there will be nothing left of this fragile alliance. A desperate escape. Before Ethan could pull the trigger, the chamber filled with a deafening hum. Energy fields activated, encasing the room in a shimmering barrier. Operatives of the Obsidian Veil emerged from the shadows, their weapons trained on Ethan and Saris. Run! Ethan shouted, grabbing Saris's arm. They sprinted down the corridor as bolts of energy sizzled past them. The station's alarms blared, adding to the chaos. Ethan led Saris through the twisting maze, his tactical mind working overtime to find an escape route. "This way," he yelled, spotting an emergency hatch. As they climbed into the narrow passage, the station began to quake. Explosions rippled through the structure, tearing apart the walls. Veritha's voice echoed through the comm system. "You can't escape what's coming, Commander. The veil will consume you." Ethan gritted his teeth, pulling Ceres through the hatch just as the station erupted in a blinding explosion. Their ship's autopilot engaged, dragging them out of the debris field and back into the nebula. A hollow victory. As the station disappeared in the distance, Ethan and Ceres sat in silence, the weight of their narrow escape pressing down on them. Ceres broke the silence first. "He's not just a traitor," she said quietly. "He's a zealot." Ethan nodded. "And zealots are the hardest enemies to fight. They don't care about losing, they only care about their cause." Ceres turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "Then we need to hit them where it hurts." Ethan met her gaze, his respect for her growing with each passing moment. "Agreed. But first, we need to figure out where they'll strike next." As the ship hurtled back toward Asteria, Ethan knew they were running out of time. The Obsidian Veil's plans were far from over, and the next battle would determine not just Ceres's fate, but the future of both their worlds. The Veil unmasked. The tension in the air was palpable as Ethan Calloway and Princess Ceres returned to Asteria Prime. Their escape from the nebula expanse had been a victory, but it felt hollow. The Obsidian Veil's leader, Verith, had shown his hand, and the danger wasn't just a looming threat, it was imminent. The kingdom in turmoil. As their ship docked, Kale was waiting for them, his expression grim. "We've received reports of coordinated attacks on outlying colonies. Communication lines have been severed." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're destabilizing the region." Ceres stepped forward, her determination burning brighter than ever. "What's being done to stop it?" Kale hesitated. "The king has ordered a defensive stance. He believes the attacks are meant to provoke us into spreading our forces too thin." Ceres shook her head. "This isn't a time for defense. If we wait, we'll lose everything." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your father's cautious for a reason. But I agree, we can't wait for them to come to us." Kale nodded reluctantly. "What's your plan, Commander?" Ethan's gaze hardened. "We go after their command structure. If we take down Verith and his inner circle, the veil will crumble." A council divided. The palace's high council chamber was filled with raised voices as Ethan and Ceres presented their findings. King Althara sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of stoic authority. Around him, advisors debated fiercely. "This is madness," one advisor exclaimed. "To strike at the heart of this rebellion would leave the kingdom vulnerable. And doing nothing would let them destroy us from within," Ceres countered, her voice cutting through the noise. Ethan stepped forward, his calm yet commanding tone silencing the room. "We have actionable intelligence. If we move quickly, we can dismantle their network before they gain more ground." King Althara leaned forward, his violet eyes piercing. "You propose a strike team?" Ethan nodded. "A small, precise operation. In and out before they even know we're there." The king considered this for a long moment before finally speaking. "Very well. But my daughter stays behind." "No," Ceres said firmly. "I'm going." The king's expression darkened. "You are my daughter and the future of this kingdom. You will not throw your life away on a fool's errand." Ceres met his gaze without flinching. "This isn't about me. It's about what this kingdom stands for. If I stay behind, I'll be nothing but a symbol. Let me be something more." The king's silence was deafening, but finally, he relented with a heavy sigh. "You have my blessing. But if anything happens to her, Commander, you will answer to me." The infiltration. The strike team consisted of Ethan, Ceres, Kale, and a handful of elite Asterian operatives. Their target was a hidden fortress on a barren moon, the Vale's primary command center, according to intelligence recovered from the mining colony. The approach was harrowing. The moon's surface was dotted with jagged craters, and the fortress was heavily fortified. Using stealth cloaking, their ship slipped past the outer defenses, landing in a secluded ravine. Inside the fortress, the air was heavy with the hum of machinery and the faint echoes of distant voices. Ethan led the team through the labyrinthine corridors, his every sense on high alert. "Stay close," he whispered to Saris. "I'm not going anywhere," she replied, her voice steady. They reached the control center, where rows of terminals displayed live feeds of the Vale's operations. Kale and the operatives secured the room while Ethan and Saris accessed the central database. "This is it," Saris murmured, her fingers flying across the console. "We can shut down their communications, disrupt their supply chains." "Not so fast," came a cold voice. Ethan spun, his weapon drawn, as Verith stepped into the room flanked by heavily armed guards. His smug expression sent a wave of anger through Ethan. "Did you really think I wouldn't see you coming?" Verith sneered. The battle for the future. Chaos erupted as Veritha's guards opened fire. Ethan dove for cover, his weapon blazing as he returned fire. Saris, refusing to cower, grabbed a fallen guard's weapon and joined the fray. Kale and the operatives fought valiantly, but Veritha's forces were relentless. The control room became a war zone, sparks flying as energy bolts struck the consoles. "You can't win this, Calloway," Verith taunted, his voice rising above the chaos. "Your kind doesn't belong here. The Vale will cleanse this galaxy of your weakness." Ethan's focus sharpened. He lunged toward Verith, their weapons clashing in a brutal melee. The Asterian traitor fought with a ferocity that matched Ethan's own, but Ethan's years of training and resilience gave him the edge. Meanwhile, Saris worked frantically to override the fortress's systems. "Ethan," she shouted. "I need more time." Ethan parried Veritha's blade, his voice a growl. "You've got it." With a final, decisive strike, Ethan disarmed Verith and pinned him against a wall. "It's over," Ethan said, his voice cold. "Not quite," Verith replied, a sinister smile creeping across his face. He pressed a hidden button on his wrist device, triggering a countdown on the control room's main console. A race against time. Self-destruct activated, the automated system announced. Detonation in 3 minutes. "Saris, we need to move," Ethan shouted. "Almost there," she yelled, her hands flying over the controls. "If I can reroute the power, I can delay the detonation." Ethan turned to Kale. "Get the team out of here. Now." Kale hesitated but nodded, leading the operatives toward the exit. Ethan stayed behind, covering Saris as she worked. "Got it," Saris exclaimed, the countdown freezing at 30 seconds. Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the exit. "Let's go." They sprinted through the fortress as explosions began to ripple through the structure. Debris rained down around them, the walls shaking violently. Just as they reached the ship, the fortress erupted in a massive fireball, the shockwave propelling them into the cockpit. A Pyrrhic victory. As the ship soared away from the burning moon, Saris collapsed into a seat, her chest heaving. Ethan sat beside her, his expression unreadable. "We did it," she said, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "For now," Ethan replied. "But this isn't over." Saris turned to him, her violet eyes filled with determination. "It's a start. And we'll finish it. Together." Ethan nodded, the faintest hint of a smile breaking through his grim demeanor. For the first time in years, he allowed himself a sliver of hope. The dawn of a new alliance. The aftermath of the fortress's destruction reverberated across Asteria Prime like a seismic wave. The Obsidian Vale had been dealt a crushing blow, but Ethan Calloway knew better than to let his guard down. Rebels like Verith didn't just vanish, they evolved, regrouping in the shadows. And shadows had a way of creeping back. Return to the palace. Ethan and Ceres's return to the celestial palace was met with a mix of relief and unease. The king's advisors were quick to congratulate them on their victory, but whispers of lingering threats echoed through the corridors. Ethan stayed quiet during the debriefing, his sharp eyes scanning the room, searching for cracks in the foundation of trust. King Althora rose from his throne, his voice steady but tinged with weariness. "You've done well, Commander. But I fear this victory is only the beginning of a larger war." Ethan nodded. "Veritha's network has been disrupted, but there are cells we haven't uncovered. They'll strike again." The king turned to Ceres, his expression softening. "And you, my daughter. Your courage has proven invaluable. Perhaps I underestimated your resolve." Ceres inclined her head, though her gaze remained locked on her father. "I only did what was necessary, father. We must be proactive if we're to secure peace." Althora sighed deeply. "You sound like your mother." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Ethan, sensing the shift in mood, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we need to solidify the alliance between Earth and Asteria. Together, we can ensure the veil never rises again." The king studied Ethan for a long moment before speaking. "Very well. You will lead the effort, Commander. But know this, failure is not an option." Unveiling the true threat. As Ethan delved deeper into the intelligence recovered from the fortress, a chilling realization dawned. The Veil's ultimate goal wasn't just the destabilization of Asteria, it was the annihilation of Earth. The encrypted files revealed plans for a weapon of unimaginable power, one capable of tearing through planetary defenses with ease. Ethan shared his findings with Ceres in the privacy of the palace's war room. "They're targeting Earth next," he said, his voice low. "They want to sever the alliance by destroying my home." Ceres's violet eyes widened. "Then we have no choice. We have to stop them before they strike." "Easier said than done," Ethan replied. "The weapon's location is heavily shielded. We'll need more than brute force to get to it." Ceres leaned closer, her determination palpable. "Then we outthink them. We use their own tactics against them." The final mission. With the king's reluctant blessing, Ethan and Ceres assembled a coalition of Earth and Asterian forces. It was a gamble, two worlds working together against a common enemy. The operation's success would not only determine the fate of the alliance but also set the tone for future cooperation. Their target was a hidden installation buried deep within an asteroid field. Intelligence suggested the weapon was incomplete, but the clock was ticking. Every passing moment brought the Veil closer to launching their devastating attack. As their fleet approached the asteroid field, Ethan addressed the assembled forces via holographic transmission. "This isn't just about Asteria or Earth. This is about the survival of everything we've worked for. Stick to the plan, trust your team, and we'll come out of this stronger than ever." The Battle of the Asteroid. The assault began with surgical precision. Earth's advanced stealth fighters wove through the asteroid field, dismantling automated defenses while Asterian ground forces infiltrated the installation. Ethan and Ceres led the charge, their complementary styles of combat creating an unstoppable force. Inside, the battle was brutal. The Veil's operatives fought with a ferocity born of desperation, but Ethan's leadership and Ceres's adaptability turned the tide. They pushed deeper into the installation, their objective clear: disable the weapon before it could be activated. As they reached the control room, they found Verith waiting for them. His calm demeanor was unnerving, his confidence unshaken despite the chaos. "You think you've won?" Verith sneered. "This isn't the end. It's only the beginning." Ethan raised his weapon. "You've lost, Verith. Surrender." Verith smirked, pressing a button on his wrist device. The room trembled as the weapon began to power up. "If I fall, I'll take you with me. Sacrifice and triumph." Ethan and Saris worked frantically to shut down the weapon. The controls were complex, designed to self-destruct if tampered with. As time ran out, Ethan made a decision. "Get out of here," he said to Saris. "No," she replied, her voice fierce. "We do this together." "There's no time," Ethan insisted. "You're the future of your people. I'm just a soldier. And I'm tired of people deciding my fate for me," Saris shot back. "We finish this together." Ethan hesitated but relented. Together, they rerouted the weapon's power, redirecting its energy into a feedback loop. The installation began to collapse, its own weapon turning against it. As they sprinted toward their extraction point, Vareth lunged at Ethan in a final act of defiance. Saris intervened, disarming Vareth with a swift strike before Ethan delivered the final blow. The rebel leader fell, his plans crumbling around him. A new dawn. The destruction of the weapon marked the end of the Obsidian Veil. Their forces scattered, their ideology shattered. Ethan and Saris returned to Asteria Prime as heroes, their bond stronger than ever. In a private moment, Saris turned to Ethan. "You didn't just save me, Ethan. You saved everything we've built." He smiled faintly. "We saved it. Together." The alliance between Earth and Asteria flourished in the years that followed, a beacon of hope in a galaxy often divided by fear and prejudice. Ethan remained at Saris's side, not just as her protector but as a trusted partner. As they stood on the palace balcony, watching the twin suns rise, Saris spoke softly. "Do you think peace will last?" Ethan looked at her, his blue eyes steady. "It will. As long as we keep fighting for it." Together, they faced the dawn of a new era, ready to defend the fragile peace they had forged with their blood, sweat, and unwavering resolve.